Welcome to Tag Talks Happy Hour with Ajit Kara. One part small talk, all parts real talk. This is the part of the day when Ajit gets to know the people behind the job titles at Tag.
Hello, my name is Ajit Kara and I'm the CEO of Tag Americas. I believe that every company's biggest asset are its people. And I'm very fortunate to work at Tag where I think we have amazing people. So I decided to do a podcast to really understand what makes them tick and who are the people behind the curtain, so to speak. As always, I'm joined by Kaylie Stansfield, my producer. Hey, Kaylie, how are you doing?
I'm well, Ajit. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad. How is your week going this week?
I'm always busy, you know that.
I see the earrings this week are very long.
A little more subtle than usual. So that means I'm head down and getting down to business.
Today, I'm delighted that I'm joined by a gentleman called Jacques Tégé. He works in our Taylor James business as head of pipeline. Welcome, Jacques.
Thank you.
Have a sip of your wine. Let me know how you think. What do you think of it?
Fantastic.
Nice, is it? Good. I always like drinking this early in the day. It just makes the day go much nicer. So, Jacques, welcome to my podcast. And just talk about, you're one of the few people that in our company was actually born and raised in New York. So,
yes.
Whereabouts in New York were you born?
Yeah, I was born in Brooklyn in a neighborhood called Crown Heights. You might have heard of that neighborhood. It's nicer now that it's a historic district, but back in the 60s and 70s, it was nice. It was nice enough.
And did you stay in the neighborhood or have you moved out? Or?
My father and mother lived with my mother's mother, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother.
Which is normal in those days, wasn't it?
I think
Extended
it was.
family.
I think it was. So, he saved, and when he was able to buy his first house, he moved us out to Queens.
Oh, wow.
So we moved to basically on the Queens-Nassau border.
Right, all suburbs.
Yeah, the real suburbs at that point, and I was 11 or 12. So I had spent my early years in Brooklyn, and then through high school I was in Queens. But then when I aged out of living with my folks, I moved back to Brooklyn. So I must have had an affinity for Brooklyn.
It's a pretty trendy place to be now, isn't it? It really is.
It is. It is.
And so when you were growing up, I did look at this as quite interesting. You wanted to be all the things that I wanted to be. So tell me about the things that when you were a young child, that you aspired to be.
Well, golly. All right, then I'm going to have to tread that ground. So when I was very, very young, I was, I wanted to be the astronaut, the cop. They looked like prestigious positions. I think my dad wore a uniform to work.
I was going to say that the trick here is around the uniform, wasn't it? So
I think it was. Yeah.
Astronaut, police officer,
some sort of an official capacity sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, good for you. I always wanted to be a police officer, actually.
I actually took the test.
Did you?
Yeah, I was in grad school studying computer graphics. Things were fairly lean. I had started a design company when I was in grad school with a couple of partners in Chelsea, and we lasted for about a year and change, and then it kind of tanked. And I had a sister in law enforcement, and she actually just retired. She spent 33 years. She was in Interpol and did the whole international thing. And she was encouraging me to take the test, and I was like, well, do I really want to, won't things improve for my CG career? So I did wind up taking the test, and I got like 105 or something like that. And
was that good? Out of 100?
Out of 100, yeah. It's like, they give you extra points for getting your name right, I think. And they did call, but I was like, I think I can make this CG thing work.
But I'll come back to that because I'm interested around how you come into the industry, and you're very artful, which we'll come back to. But back to New York, being in and around the suburbs of New York, what attracts you to the Big Apple and the city? I mean, many people that have either come to New York or moved away from New York, you've kind of stayed here. What attracts you to that, apart from pizza?
I think in our industry, there's a lot going on as far as commercial work, the art scene. That's New York is basically the central to that. I actually, when I got married and had kids, I moved out to Jersey because I didn't really want them to. I wanted to show them a different look.
The Jersey look.
Yeah, the Jersey look. I don't regret it, but New York is still the place to be as far as this.
And was that linked to the fact that you did do? What brought you to? So you were fascinated by military folks or astronauts, etc. But then the pivot went to art.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, I had always liked drawing. And when I was very young, I was also, into going to church and these sorts of issues as a 6, 7, 8-year-old. I don't know why I was embedded there, but I remember the first time that I actually looked at Cecil B. DeMille's 10 Commandments and just looking at how artful it was beautiful, and especially the VFX, like the splitting of. I spent some time just illustrating, like making a little book of all of the VFX shots, and that film at maybe 8 or 9 years old. But from then on, I was really interested in visual effects and animation. So, into the Ray Harryhausen movies, like The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad was a big favorite of mine.
Now, that is arguably one of my favorite. Is that the one with or is it Jason the Argonauts? Was that the one where they had the kind of big mythical creatures that he was fighting?
Both of them had big mythical creatures, but there was the unique thing about Sinbad movie was, I forget the name of the god with the multi-arms, 6 arms, and I was just fascinated by that whole sequence. And so what that spawned was when I was in 7th grade, I partnered up with another friend of mine who was also a good illustrator, and we formed a company.
Right. Entrepreneurial.
Yeah, GT Enterprises, and what we did was 8mm stop motion movies.
And that's how it was done in those days, wasn't it? That kind of stop, shoot.
Yeah. It was crazy. All traditional effects. Fangoria magazine was one of my favorites because it would talk about what was happening in the industry as far as.
But what do you think about because when I watched, I haven't seen it for a long time. Now you're going to make me want to go and watch Sinbad again. But I think I was astonished when I saw it, and then I looked to see how old it was. Because you're thinking, well, actually, these are pretty good effects. And then you go back and they were made in the 50s, if I remember correctly. And you think, oh, my God, how did they do this in the 50s? And now you're seeing more and more of these older films being digitally re-enhanced. Are you where do you stand on that spectrum? Do you wish the original art to be left as alone, or don't mind it being enhanced? Because it's astonishing how they did it then.
It definitely is. When we talk about enhanced, if we're talking about improving the quality of the picture, but not necessarily re-overlaying effects or enhancing effects, then I'm all for it. Because what's coming out as a result are frames that are a lot cleaner than they were back in the day. So that sort of level of remastering I'm in favor of.
And what's your view on deep fakes, which, by the way, is disturbing when you see how realistic some of the stuff is?
Absolutely phenomenal. So are you a fan of like The Mandalorian? And I think there's a new Boba Fett series on Disney Plus with Luke Skywalker as he looked at the end of episode 6, I believe, because it's like telling a backstory, the post-war story of Luke Skywalker or whatever. So they use deepfake technology to provide us a version of Luke Skywalker that looks better than the traditional CG pipeline version of the digital
crazy,
Luke Skywalker.
So when you started doing that work yourself, did that inspire you, and did you spend because you're quite science-fi buff as well, don't you? You like all that sort of stuff as well?
Definitely. I remember seeing Star Wars for the first time, actually The Empire Strikes Back at Lowe's Astor Plaza in Times Square. I think I was 12 at the time. And, widescreen 70mm, we got great seats, and I had never seen a movie like that before at that age, at that scale, and totally engaged from then.
And back to what was your earliest memories then? I mean, what sort of impacted you when you were a younger child?
When you talk about things that are impactful, there are those positive things that are impactful, and then there are things that are traumatic. And I'll have to say, one of the reasons that I wanted to raise my kids in Jersey is because there were a fair amount of traumatic things that I witnessed in growing up in Crown Heights when I was younger. But understanding about the assassination of Martin Luther King, with that layered on top of the traumatic things that I would witness in the neighborhood, for some reason, it made that visceral. And I remember seeing a photograph in Life magazine of Dr. King in the hospital I think this was the first assassination attempt. I remember just not being able to grasp why it is there's so much violence in the world. And I also remember being hopeful that by the time I was grown, that we would have world peace. Things would become harmonious, harmonize themselves. And that hasn't happened.
Well, it hasn't happened, but what has happened is you're probably one of the calmest people that I know. And I'll come on to why, because, I'll tell you now that, you very kindly host sessions in our business for helping people with stress, and, you use your martial arts skills for that. Tell me, I never actually managed to get to one of your classes, but they're pretty well subscribed in our meeting room here, where you would take people through. Talk to me about where that came from. I think you're a self-proclaimed introvert, aren't you? So tell me about how you felt with those experiences and how it's shaped you, and how you sort of, I think you've conquered the wrong word, but you turned it into a positive, in my view.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of it stems from those things that I described witnessing when I was younger, and feeling less in control than I would like to be. So when I was old enough to sign up for classes, I signed up to a martial arts school where they trained in Shotokan karate and judo and Chinese Kempo, to learn real self-defense.
Right. So you did it from a protection perspective.
To try to, get some control over a situation and environment that I felt like I had no control over. It's a sense of empowerment when you kind of don't have to be afraid. It's an eternal struggle because I find, I still don't like that sort of conflict. But yeah, it was an attempt to get control over that.
It's very relevant today, with the things going on in the world today. It's easy to feel a little bit helpless, a little bit, and I think that can affect us. And I think, your mental well-being is critical. And so how did you recognise, or when did you recognise that your martial arts was helping you with your kind of mental well-being, and how did that translate to helping folks in TAG? Because you do. I mean, a lot of people rely on you for doing that.
Another great question. So I've always been a spiritual person as well. And there was a point where the school was introduced to these folks that were doing Tai Chi. And I started practicing Tai Chi with that group. That's one of many different Tai Chi instructors or schools that I've practiced with. But what it introduced me to was a feeling of being wholly connected, not only to myself, my body, my movement, but to my surroundings, even down to, what was happening in the atmosphere, the air that was coursing past my skin. So I was not used to that level of realization of my position, my relationship to my surroundings. And I felt some sort of a spiritual connection happen at that point. I realized that through practicing Tai Chi, you can achieve this level of this feeling of harmonious existence, even amongst the turmoil and the chaos that you might be embedded in. If I can feel that level of improvement or that level of separation from chaos and from fear and from feeling out of control, then other folks could feel it too. And so I'm a staunch advocate for people exposing themselves to that, whether it's Tai Chi or whether it's yoga, some activity that can take them away from that stress space. Because you don't actually always have to be engaged in the activity to remove yourself from that stressful place. You start to develop these mechanisms that you can trigger on the fly, no matter where you are, and that's really the goal.
Yeah. Pre-COVID, when we were in the office all the time, you had a full class every Tuesday, I think I remember.
Yeah, that was encouraging.
It was great.
I was happy that people wanted to connect with that.
And so talk to me a bit more about family. So you're very proud of your children, as you should be. Have they taken on their martial arts as well?
I used to take my son. He's 21 now. He's at Rutgers.
He's not a boy anymore, is he? He's a man.
Yeah, he is. He is brilliant electrical engineer. I can't tell you the number of 4.0s that he's pulled out, taking advanced. But anyway, when he was younger, I used to take him with me to my sessions. So he was basically my apprentice. I would take him to the school in Queens where the practice is, because it's a bad neighborhood, the practice is more aggressive, more visceral, more quote unquote real. And then to the classes in Jersey, which were more sort of laid back. So he was exposed to both sides of it. I think maybe I introduced him to it too early because he became somewhat disinterested. But he told me,
always the case.
Yeah, he told me a couple of days ago that he's actually started to practice in his dorm again. So
wow.
I'm happy about that.
Yeah, if you could imagine yourself doing something in the future, what would it be?
The thing that really inspired me to dig into this career was filmmaking. We were telling stories, there was an enjoyment behind creating these environments, building them up, tearing them down, using them to communicate something. I think that if I had a ton of spare time and endless resources, I would probably get back into that. There's some scripts I want to produce. I'd probably do that.
Ask Ajit anything!
Jacques.
Yes.
You've been a lot of fun. This is your opportunity now to ask me anything that you may want to ask.
Actually, yeah, there is a question. It has to do with your approach to the business.
Right.
Something that you say frequently, and what I think is true, I think it's authentic, that TAG is the best place, you want to make TAG the best place for people to work. And that is such a great angle and perspective to take on managing a business. What led you to understanding how deeply important that aspect is, more than just the bottom line?
It's a good question, Jacques. And I think for me, it came from a point of view of a very simple perspective and a very simple understanding, which is that, we are a people business and our clients engage with us from a people perspective. Some of the things that you talked about today, if people are engaged, highly motivated, passionate and happy and mentally well-being, all of those things put together, whatever role you do in the company, you're more likely to be successful at that and to be a highly charismatic individual that other people feed off that and clients feed off that. So it comes from a very simple, humble view that nearly everyone that comes to work wants to do a great job. And if we can create the environment where people feel highly engaged, then the best will be for everyone. It's really as simple as that. And I stand by that observation. You know, people perform best when they feel secure, confident, happy, engaged, powerful, and all these things. I think that's what drives folks forward.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
So, Jacques, I would like to end by saying thank you for everything that you do for the business. You know, like the passion that you show to help other colleagues. The Tai Chi classes are fantastic. You know, it's clear to see that you're a good human being, a good family man, and thank you for everything, Jacques.
Thanks for having me.
Enjoy the wine.
I will.
Join us soon for another episode of Tag Talks Happy Hour with Ajit Kara and learn more about the people behind the job titles at TAG.